Hi, welcome to another LRCC Soundbite. I asked myself a question this week. Where do I go if I want to feel close to God? Where can I go so I feel somehow immersed in something of who God is? Some people tell me they go and sit in the garden, surrounded by nature. Many years ago now, I spent a few years living in North Wales. More often than not, on a Saturday, me and one of my friends would head out into Snowdonia and find a mountain to climb. Those were special times for me as I looked at the scale and the beauty in that place. Living in Suffolk, I don't get to climb so many mountains these days, but some of the coastlines and the places around here are just as beautiful, but in a different way. Another friend of mine looks up to the sky and sees the stars and the planets, millions of them, and finds God's awesomeness in them. Other people might go to a place of worship or look at a picture that is special to them. I guess that if we want to look for God, all we need to do is look around and see what it is around us that helps us feel closer to Him. Now, several thousand years ago, Israel had a king called David. At this point, David was a relatively new king, and he decided that he needed to build a palace for himself in the city that he decided would be his capital, the city of Jerusalem. He went ahead and all was completed, this amazing, beautiful palace, custom designed and built for him. And I imagine him one day standing at a window looking out and seeing a tent next door. But it wasn't just any tent. This wasn't just someone sleeping rough or out camping. This tent had been with Israel for a very long time. This was the tent that God had told them to construct after the Israelites had escaped from Egypt and were wandering around in the wilderness. This tent was the tent where God was. The special Ark of the Covenant holding the stone tablets with the 10 Commandments on them, amongst other things, was kept here. And every time the people had moved around the wilderness, they'd pack up this tent and take it with them. There was huge history in this tent, and it symbolised that wherever they went, God would always go with them. David saw the tent and realised that he had this brand new amazing palace, but God was still in a tent. What should he do? Surely by now they should have built a temple for God rather than leave him in a tent. So David shared his thoughts with a prophet, a guy called Nathan, who later got a message from God to pass on to David. And the message wasn't quite what David expected. Basically, God said, "No, I don't want a temple yet. One day I will. In fact, one of your sons will build it. But for now, leave me in the tent." And I was wondering why God would give this slightly strange message. After all, why not build a temple? And I wonder if the answer to that might have something to do with God being mobile. To the Israelites, God was centred on the Ark of the Covenant. Where that box went, that's where God went. So for as long as God figuratively lived in a tent, he was inherently mobile. He could go wherever he was needed at any time. And David never built the temple he wanted to build. Instead, his son Solomon would do that. The Ark of the Covenant then would eventually take its place in the temple, and the people would go there to worship. Fast forward to Jesus, and something rather symbolic happened. When Jesus died on the cross, the act that would make it possible for all of us to have our sins forgiven and get back into relationship with God as friends, at that moment when he died, the curtain in the temple that separated this box, the Ark of the Covenant, from everybody else was torn in two. But it was torn from the top to the bottom. It was torn from where God was to where man was, top to bottom. This was huge. This wasn't a 4-foot curtain. This was massive. God ripped it in half, and in doing so declared that he will no longer be confined to any building, no tent, but he is out there. He's out in the world, out amongst people, and nothing is ever going to keep him in again. And that's where we are today. We have our churches, but God isn't confined to them. Anywhere you are, God is also there. So you can find yourself feeling near to God, in the garden, up a mountain, staring into space, or in a beautiful church building. And you're right, because he is there, right with you, all the time. He truly is everywhere. Do have a great week. God bless you, and I'll see you next time.